Okay, it's time to talk about Chapter 10, and I'll hopefully get 11, 12, and 13 done soon so we can sum up the whole course. This chapter is a lot of math, so very little to learn except how to record some compound entries into the general journal. Other than that, it's all multiplication. So let's take a look at this. This is payroll computations and what to do. Just looking through the PowerPoint, it's telling us what we're going to do in this chapter, which is calculate earnings, taxes, and how to record that payroll information into an accounting journal. You can go through this and read. Most of the book is talking about the type of taxes that have to be taken out of payroll every pay period and how to do so and what employees are and how some of them are characterized as administrative and some are not. They're taxed different ways, so it's important to know what position is what when you're characterizing an employee. Okay, there are different laws that pertain to employee earnings and withholding. We have the Fair Labor Act. You can just look all this stuff and read it on your own. Basically, it just sets a minimum hourly pay, and it also requires the company to pay time and a half beyond 40 hours of work. We also know that we have to pay Social Security tax, both from our paycheck, and we pay up to $122,700 a year. So if you make more than that, they're just use the base rate. So you could make more than that and still only pay 6% of the 122,700. Got your Medicare tax that you're going to have to pay for when you retire as well. And you'll be paying state and local taxes. These are all things you can read on your own. Unemployment tax, federal unemployment tax, insurance costs. I'm just going to not discuss all those. I'm just going to discuss the actual work we need to do. Workers' comp. I have found when I've tried to do workers' comp before that, wow, they have these workers' comp doctors that are really picky. That they want to do everything not to pay you, and you pay into it and everything. And I haven't known anybody who's ever received good compensation from workers' comp, but maybe you do. All right, these are things you'll need to collect when you are hiring somebody. You'll have to have employee records. You'll have to make sure that you have all this information on hand. Let's go ahead. They're telling us some of the basics. How do you compute hourly rates, salary, commission, and piece rate? So that's easy enough. Multiplication. Somebody works 40 hours a week at $10 a pay. It's $400. Easy enough. Overtime would be multiplying it by time and a half. So time and a half, which is $9 times 1.5, is $13.50 an hour. So if you did 5 extra hours of overtime, you get paid $13.50 an hour instead of $9 an hour. And you can compute that as well. Then you need to know what you need to pull out for your employees if you're hiring. You'll have to take out of their pay the FICA and Social Security. So in this case, you would take 6.2% out of their gross pay. So the first example, $24.80 would come out for Social Security tax. Okay, there are wages that are not taxed, and that's any wage, like we said earlier, above $122,700. You get a refund if you've been overpaid. You know that every year when you file your taxes. You can just go ahead and read these things. Let's work on some problems. Medicare tax is 1.45% for your pay. Then you have federal income tax. That's going to depend on how much withholding you have. So that's kind of the key. You could claim yourself and your child maybe as a dependent and have 2 withholdings and then pay your taxes. And then, by the time you file the next year, you probably would be breaking even or near break even and wouldn't get that much back. But there are some people that will claim like 7 withholdings or so. I know people that claim up to 12, and they only have 2 people in the house, not 12, so that they can have a bunch of money up front. And then when it comes time to pay the taxes, they have to pay a lot every April. But in the meantime, they have that huge amount up front. So perhaps they do that so they can invest it and then hopefully make money by the time the taxes are due. I'm not sure why they do that, but a lot of people do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this is we're going to go through this would be your withholding chart, how many dependents you have, who you're claiming, and how much to withhold. Let's go ahead and look at a payroll register and accounting. We have our employees, we have their withholding allowances, whether there's just themselves or a spouse and dependent, or 2 maybe here with them and their spouse and no dependents. And whether they're married or not will make a big difference on what your taxes are. Here you'll have your deductions that'll show up in their paycheck as well. But it's your job in accounting to put all this in a journal. Learning how to write the Social Security tax, learning how to write all this in a journal, which is what we're going to do. Journalizing. This is the key to the chapter, getting things done. How to record payroll. Okay, here's what we want. So let's say we've got our paycheck information here. And we have office salaries, shipping wages. Notice how they're separated. Remember I told you how things are taxed differently depending on the job? Administrative jobs, which would be office salaries, are taxed differently than regular staff jobs. Not sure why they do that, but they do that. So it's important that the position be separated. So these are called compound entries because we have we might have 2, like we have here, 2 debits and a lot of credits. Anytime there's more than 2 entries, anytime there's more than 1 debit and 1 credit, they're called compound entries, and that's where your debits and credits still always have to equal, but you're writing quite a few entries. So you're going to drop down your office salary expense. All expenses, remember, are debits, so they get the debit, the 2 expenses. And all the taxes that you need to owe and pay later would be tax payable. And that is all the credits. And both sides should equal. Your debits will equal your credit. Okay, paying employees are just saying sometimes use direct deposit or pay by check. But we need to journalize that as well. So you would take the total amounts of your salaries and wages payable and the amount of cash that was paid from the bank to record salaries and wages. Here, some people have a separate payroll account, which is a good idea. So let's go through the cash again. So when you're setting up your chart of accounts, you don't just have a cash account. You have a cash account, you have a petty cash account, and now they're suggesting you have a payroll cash account. So sometimes you'll have 2 or 3, 4 different types of cash accounts. And that's important to know when you're setting up a company that you're going to have more than one. Let's go through earning record for each employee. There'll be a computer will generate this, but you'll be generating your monthly earnings, and your computer is going to actually generate everything for you. That's why I'm going through this chapter so fast, so that it's important that you just know how to put the journal entry in the journal and do the multiplication. And that's it. This is a very simple chapter. Let's go through and do some problems. All right, so we have to do exercise 10.1 through, let's see what we need to do. We are going to do 10.1 to 10.7, problem set 1A, 4A, 1B, 2B. Okay, so 10.1, don't really need to kind of go through that. It's simply multiplication, right? Your hourly rate times the hours worked. So let's see if I got to pull up 10.1 here. You're just going to throw in the hourly rate times the hours worked and give you gross earnings. That's without taking out any taxes yet. 10.2 is just going to be math as well. Okay, so in this case, determine the regular earnings, the overtime earnings, and the gross earnings. So you can see that these hours worked, there are 3 of them that are over 40 hours a week, so that you will have overtime to compute. And that will look something like this. Hourly rate, overtime rate. That's going to be 1.5 times the hourly rate. The hours they worked, the hours overtime, their regular pay, their overtime pay. Add the two together to get the gross pay. Let's go ahead and take a look at how that was done. Maybe perhaps write out the first one and figure out the rest. And in 10.3, again, more math. Determine the amount of Social Security tax to be taken from each employee's gross pay. Assume 6.2% Social Security tax rate and the base earnings of $122,700 for that year. So it looks like they're all going to be taxed here. Nobody is over $122,700. Number 3 will be. Let's see what that looks like. Okay. Doesn't matter. They're just taking out the tax. Here, times just for December. You don't even really need to deal with this earnings for the whole year. The columns that you need to deal with are these last two right here. 6.2% of December's earnings. And the reason you can see that that's the case is also just by clicking up on Social Security tax formula up here in the formula bar. 0.062 is 6.2% times H25. And if you were to go ahead and hit the control key on the keyboard and then the tittle key, tittle is right next to the number 1. It changes all Excel into formulas. And that way, you can see any Excel spreadsheet that there is out there. You can see these formulas by hitting the tittle key. So there's formulas for 10.2, and there's the formulas for 10.3. Now I'll just hit the control tittle key again, and it'll go back to regular Excel. $10.4 to $10.6. Again, this is all just doing math, but let's take a look at it really quickly. I really should try to zoom this up so we can see it better. All right, here we're figuring out the Medicare tax. So if you look at the formula here, I'll show you the formula. I'll hit Control Tittle again, and you can see the formula right here at 1.45 times H5, which is your taxable earnings. Here you're going to have to figure out in the next problem what the withholding allowances are by looking at the table, figuring out if they're married or single, and do the multiplication that way. So let me go ahead and hit Control Tittle, get it back to normal. Okay. And in this case, there aren't any formulas for you to see or do. You'll just be looking at the table and writing in the amounts. Okay, so this is 10.4. This is 10.5. 10.6 is what probably the most important, is how do we put this in the general journal? And this is where we throw in our compound entries for, this is our payroll for the week. That's why we've got an August 7th date. And we're going to put in the total expense. That will be the amount that we write from the bank. And then all the payables, all the credits. Social Security tax payable, Medicare tax payable, employee income tax payable, and salary payable. And then you'll just payroll for the week, just to let you know what's going on. And they will equal. Then, of course, you have to issue the check, right? So that'll be cash, the $18.90 coming out for the salaries payable right here. Notice your check is not issued for 2007-10 because the other monies go to the taxes that you have to pay. Okay, let's go on to the next one. 10.7. Okay, in this, prepare a journal entry to record the company's payroll for the week. Use the account names given in the chapter. Use number 16 as the page number for the general journal. Prepare the general journal entry to summarize the checks to pay the weekly payroll. Okay, so we know what the net pay for the week is. We know the gross earnings, the Social Security tax, the Medicare tax, the income tax. Okay, so let's take a look at how that journal entry should look. $10.7. Okay, sales, salary, expense. On 10.7, is that right? Prepare the general entry, use the accounts. Okay. Here we go. Oh, that was the previous one. There's 10.7. I thought something was funny. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so we know that White Company showed the following totals for the month: gross earnings $38,950, Social Security tax, Medicare tax, income tax, net amount due. Of the total earnings, how much was for salary and how much was for office. It's separated as they are taxed differently. There are different categories. One is hourly, one is probably exempt. Prepare a general journal entry for the monthly payroll. Use page 20 of the journal. Okay, so let's figure out what these amounts are. Sales, salary, expense, $30,500. Now, where did we get that from? We got $30,500 right here for sales, salaries. Office salary expense then is $8,450. Those are your two debit. The expenses. Now come the tax payables. We got $2,414.90. Where does that come from? That should come from Social Security right here. 241,090. So all we're doing is taking these amounts and throwing them in the journal. Let's go ahead and take a look at what it's supposed to look like when it's done. And we're also going to add the date of the payroll so that we know exactly what's going on. So let's take a look at the salaries payable. $30,128.32. You're like, where did you get that number? It is this $30,000, the net amount due. They gave it to us. That'll be 10.7. That's the last of the exercises. Gave you some short problems. I believe, let me just check which ones they were. 1A, 4A, 1B, 2B. 1A. That would be this one. Short problem. This is just for you to figure out in the table what the earnings were and journalizing them, the payroll for the week. 1A, then it was 2A, I believe, which was just figuring out the math. Then there was, no, that was 4A, 1B, 2B, 4A. I gave you guys 4A. Let's take a look at 4A. Oh yeah, again, just looking at the table. I wanted to keep it simple. That's 4A, and figuring out what to put as the expense. So you got your salary expense. $41,000, which is given to you in the problem. And then how to journalize everything again. And again, this was also doing the math. But let's take a look at the math for 1 second, because I want you to see the formulas, which you probably can't see. So I'll hit Control Tittle, and now we can actually look at what's going on. So this is 10-4, problem 10-4. And we've got the columns. We've got the Social Security tax. And some of them are filled in, and some of them we had to compute. But there's the formula for the net pay if you were to keep everything in the same column. G5 minus H5 minus J5 minus O5. And then the sum from U5 to V7. You have a sum here and a sum here. These are all sums. So make sure your Excel spreadsheet looks as well. It'll be easier to follow along. I'm going to go ahead and hit Control Tittle again and get it back to normal. Okay, so that's 10-4 you're going to look at. And then the last one was 1B and 2B. 1B. Again, I wanted you to follow how to do the chart, how to do all the multiplication, and then how to do the payroll. And 2B, again, figuring out the earnings. Control Tittle that. And see if we put in okay. Can't get my spreadsheet open any further. Let's do this. We happen to not use any formulas in this one. These are just simple multiplications. So this is something you just need to pull out your calculator for and make sure that you got the numbers correct. Make sure you know how to do it. Again, you know, your computer is going to be doing all this. But the part you're going to be doing when you do accounting is the journal entries, and that's the most important thing to learn. And I think I'm ready to go ahead and move on to chapter 11. I think 11 should be okay. 12, I believe, is our hardest chapter. And hopefully I can get all these done shortly so you can work at your own pace. Talk to you soon.